Right, we've reached 12 o'clock, so I think it's time to start our event. Welcome to the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation. My name is Jason James and I'll be chairing it today. So there are three of us sort of fronting this today. I'm chairing it from Cambridge. We have Dr. Julie Possetti in Oxford and Shiori Ito, who is joining us from Tokyo. And I'll just very briefly introduce those two speakers. So Shiori Ito is an independent journalist and filmmaker. She wrote this book, which I happen to have here, called Black Box, which won the Free Press Association Award Grand Prize a couple of years ago. And she's one of Japan's best known activists on gender violence and associated issues, largely because of her own personal experiences, which I will leave her to describe to you as she wishes. And then our other speaker is Dr. Julie Possetti. If I can just have the next slide. So she is Global Director of Research at the International Centre for Journalists. She was previously a Senior Research Fellow at the Reuters Institute in Oxford, Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, and she's still associated there. She also has a position as a Senior Researcher at the Centre for Freedom of Media, in Sheffield. She's currently leading a UN study on violence against female journalists. So we're very pleased to have been able to bring her and Ito-san together today for this talk. Right, so without further ado, that's my introduction over. We'll have the two talks, hopefully wrap them up by about 1:45, and then the Q&A session, which I think will run a little bit longer than one, but we'll try and cut it off by about 1:15 at the latest. So over to you, Shiori-san.
Right, thank you. It's such a buzzer feeling, like I'm, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, I guess. So everyone, I don't know where you are participating from, but I'm right now in Tokyo, and it's pity that I can't see your face straight, and it's a bit sad. I got used to facing to my screen talking. And it's now weird because I see myself. So let me change to speaker view. And now I see everyone. This is great. Okay. Hello. So I'm very happy to join this event. And I must say that I had to think about twice if I want to join this speak, because it's quite still hard for me to talk about what I experienced. And recently, I decided to make a lawsuit against what I experienced on online harassment. And after that, I decided to not to talk about it. I didn't even use internet almost for 2 weeks to just detox myself. So I'm quite nervous today to talk about it. So I might take my time to explain why I decided to take a personal fight against online harassment. So I am a rape survivor, and I decided to talk about it in 2017. And it happened in the media industry. I was told that if I talk about this issue, I won't be able to work in Japan because the man I was accusing of was quite high-profile journalist. And the issue of itself, sexual violence and rape, are quite taboo topic in Japan. And as you all know, it's also have quite stigma against it. And but because I am a journalist, I've discovered that how backwards our legal system and social support network is in Japan. And it was shocking that even the media wouldn't talk about these issues. For instance, it wasn't such a popular topic to cover. They would always change the subject. They wouldn't call it rape. They would call it something like violation or something. They will use softer word to it. So it's not very clear when they report this issue. And in Japan, less than 5% of victims would go and report to police, or police sometimes wouldn't file the case. So it's quite hard to recognize how many cases are out there. So as you know, over 95% of rape cases are unreported. And I must say that, yeah, rape is one of the most unreported crime, serious crime, not only in Japan, but in world. So for me to decide to talk about what I experienced in public was quite big step for me. But I discovered that that was the only way to talk about and highlight the issue. Although I didn't want to talk about what I experienced, but I felt that I needed to talk about it to pressure to change the law. Um, Fortunately, after I spoke out, as many other activists and women spoke up, we changed the law in 2017, and it was a baby step, but our rape law hasn't changed for 110 years in Japan, so it was quite a big step for us. But what I encountered after I spoke about my experience in public was online harassment. It happened immediately right after I spoke out, and it made quite difficult for me to keep living in Japan, walking on a street. My family didn't wish to reveal my family's name, so I went by my name just was Shiori. But of course, it's internet, era. So my name was revealed. There were people who was trying to find out who my family was. There were my family's photo. People trying to find out what was my political agenda, which I didn't have any. And in the end of the day, I start receiving death threat and backlash. And first of all, it was such a new experience for me, these big waves coming into me. So I wasn't sure how serious I should take these threats. It's although it's online, I wasn't sure how serious they are to try to come after me, but it definitely made my life quite hard to go on in Japan. So I had to thank my friends in UK who helped me to move to UK during this hard time. And then I discovered a way to report and talk about from UK. And it was difficult to talk about this issue in domestic media, domestically around our community and social, society. But I found a way that it was easier to speak from outside. And then, as all you know, in 2017 October, right after Harvey Weinstein's case was revealed, Me Too movement start happening. So I think that the big movement from around the world also helped me to have voice. But unfortunately, I have to say that Me Too movement didn't really happen in Japan, but it definitely has changed the landscape that we have today. But unfortunately, these past 3 years from 2017, I have been constantly receiving threats online, no matter what I do. And first of all, my method was, do not look at it. If I don't look at it, it doesn't exist. I don't have to look at it. But of course, it, as I said, I wasn't sure how serious I should have taken these threats. And some of my friends were very worried. They told me I should go to police, but I didn't know which one I should report to because there are so many. In the end, I went to report about one case, which I quite felt my life was threatened, but that was it. And so, as I said, I decided to just not look at it. But one point, I wanted to know what kind of mindset and what kind of why they do this, why they come after me when I am just talking about let's stop violence against women and violence in general, sexual violence in general. So I start looking through some of the troller, and have to, I think some of you have experienced, but as I go look these comments, my body start shaking, my body gets cold, and it has effect on my body. So at some point I had to stop. But as a journalist, I wanted report and I wanted research of what kind of why they do this. But so far, I have been struggling to know why. But um, this year in May, one of the Netflix star, her name was Hana Kimura. She was pro wrestler and she was on popular series called Terrace House, and she had been attacked online, and she took her own life away. And that was for me the wake up call, because I felt I'd been there, and I was also feeling very um, down, because May this year I was stuck in Japan. I couldn't come back to UK. Usually when I'm living in Japan, I was disguising myself, and I felt that now I'm back in this place that I don't feel safe, and I start, I constantly receiving these threats, and I didn't know how to deal with it, and I was struggling. And this young woman, she was only 22 years old, experienced online harassment, and it leads to really tragic end. So I decided that we need to take an action. And actually, this last February, I've decided to start researching on what I had been received, because by myself, it was just too hard to do research to see these comments. So we set up 5 members of researcher, and they gathered 700,000 comments on internet about me. It wasn't all, but they gathered at least 700,000, and start looking which platform it was coming from, what kind of comment out there, what kind of negative comment, what kind of threats are out there. And of course, Twitter was one of the main platform. But I don't know if you know, but in Japan, people who use Twitter, 75% are using, they are anonymous, so they don't use their real name. And in States, it's 35.7% who doesn't use the real name. So as you see, Japan is double when it comes to, yeah, it comes to where we have people who decide to hide their identity. Um, so it is one of the place I receive the most of the threat and troll. Um, so it took us 4 months to gather these data, and after we had this very sad news in May, I've decided that I need to take legal action, so that I can say this is not okay. It can take someone's life away. And I decided to start new law case. We did it last June 8th, and it was just the beginning, because as you see, we had so many trollers, so we didn't know which one to pick. But the message, the outcome we wanted to make was that not only the people who tweet, who make these awful comments, but also these who share these comments, who likes these comments, who participated to spread these trolls around the world, should be also considered their responsibility. So right now we are looking into these who only even liked or shares sometimes. And I know some people might say, that's too much, but I think you know, the word is such a powerful tool. And for past these 3 years, I've been saved by many supportive words, but also I was almost killed by these words. Sometimes these words comes as knives, bullets, and it hurts. So I had to tell them when I see that 100 people, 1,000 people liking it, being shared these awful attacks about me, it, it gets me. So we are now preparing for more lawsuits so that we can highlight this issue. It wasn't easy, but we found a way to form team to deal with it. And I'm very happy to, you know, talk this join this session with Julie, because I think especially female journalists are often targeted around the world. And that was one of the reason why we or have been silenced to talk about these difficult issue, this sensitive issue. So yeah, that was what I experienced. And right now I'm just waiting for where my lawsuit would take me. But because of the COVID-19, it's going quite slow. But what we found out is that after we made a lawsuit, my lawyer found each one of the one who we accused of, and seems like, because we want to give the option, you can make official apology, so we can take, maybe we can take off your name. But unfortunately they weren't willing to. So what I found out was that they were thinking they were doing something right, and they have their own reason to do so. They have their own justice in somehow. And I really wish that the internet space is healthier, where we can do discussion, if, you know, not the giving each other hate speech and troll each other. But one of the thing that maybe we have difference in between UK, States, and Japan is that Japan, as I grow up, I never learned how to make discussion with each other. So if I say something that I don't agree with your opinion on this, one can feel that they've been disagreed as whole, as individual. So I feel like we need education around discussion to start with. And it's still hard for me to do all the research, but I'm right now starting to do all research about what I have been received, and I'm trying to make contact with these people who have been giving me these emails, messages, not the crazy one, but who I really am curious about why they would say such a thing. There were some women who would say these things as well. So, but until now, I haven't yet received any response from these people. So I'm trying to find a way how I can have open discussion about it. And often I found that these people also have some issue on their life, and I don't know because I haven't discussed, but that's what Hana Kimura's case um, are related. Her mother start receiving apologizing messages who have trolled her daughter, and some of them were telling her mother that they had a difficult time and they just needed to say something to someone. So I think what we need is, of course, we need to try to change the law right now. Well, I'm just talking about in Japan. I'm not very aware with what UK has, but it's quite difficult to track down these anonymous tweets. So we are trying to make it easier to start the lawsuit, because if you don't know who they are, you have to have two different lawsuits. First one is to find out their name, their addressed through court, and then you can make official case. But it's quite hard because the first lawsuit that you have to make to find out who they are, you have to prove that it was hate message, it was trolled, and which it should be discussed on the real case. But so it costs double, it takes double time. So we are now trying to pressure the government that we need to have easier way to find out. And of course, you know, when we talk about this issue, always freedom of speech discussion starts, and that's a different story. But when we receive these um, harmful messages, we do need to deal with it, and therefore we need to make this system easier to do so. So that's the first thing that we are trying to do now. And second thing was what I felt was that the same as the reason why I decided to talk about my experience of rape in 2017, I felt that I need to talk about how this can affect someone. There is Aesop tale called Boys and Flogs, and it talks about, maybe I can share this screen. Can I share this screen with you guys? I don't know how to share. I'll share screen. No, I don't know how to share. But yeah, it's called The Boys and the Frogs, and it's the Aesop tale, and it's the story about how these boys are enjoying throwing stones in the pond, and for the frogs who live in the pond, it meant death to them. So maybe for these people who is just throwing the stones at us doesn't realize that how harmful it is to who receive these stones. But it's surprising that I have to say that it is harmful, and I don't know why, because I know it's not really attacking physically, but it is. But one day I decided, because I'm now in Japan and I can't always disguise myself. Well, these days we are always wearing masks, but before the mask time, I decided to take off all the disguise because I didn't want to hide myself, to be always afraid who might gonna attack, like I've been receiving these threats. But what I found out was that when I just, decided to not wearing glasses, masks, caps, some people recognize me, but they come up to me and say how, give me all the supportive message, very kind words. And I never encounter in offline world these words that I've been receiving online. So I see the difference of offline and online world. So that shows that how it is easy to say these things online. And today I just decided to talk about my experience, but I'm very looking forward to have discussion with Julie, and I think we have so many things to talk about. So I want to finish my talk now, but I would love to do poll if you are happy with. I asked to Daiwa team to make poll. Can we start?
Okay, so we're going to try and do the poll. And then how long are we going to leave this poll open? I'm asking my colleagues that.
I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we could leave it open for the whole of Julie's talk and then look at the results when we get to Q&A. How about that?
Yeah,
okay.
That sounds
so thank you so much, Shiori-san, and a lot of comments in the chat about your courage. But let's come back to you later on. But Julie, would you like to put this all in context for us?
Sure, and I will put it in a global context, but first to say, as I'm sure everybody who just listened to Shiori is feeling, what extraordinary bravery, Shiori. And I know that sounds trite almost up against what you've experienced, but it takes such enormous courage, first to confront your lived experience of rape, secondly, to take legal action in a system which is so unwelcoming to victims speaking publicly and ensuring that there is accountability. And thirdly, you've experienced what we are discussing on a global scale, which has attracted the attention of the UN, and that is this scourge of online violence against women, in particular against female human rights defenders and journalists. And the fact that you speaking publicly about your rape experience and the attempt to get justice in your case, which, if we can call it justice, you eventually managed to succeed at in terms of the groundbreaking decision that was made in your case in your favor. But we now have a situation where online violence is causing women around the world to feel doubly silenced. So they cannot even speak up about the physical threats they face without being brutally attacked in a digital environment. So I'm going to speak about the way we need to start rethinking these issues as a convergent threat, and a convergent threat that frankly I think does take on some of the features of kinetic warfare, and we need to come to grips with that. So let me share my screen, and bear with me while we go through this clunky Zoom process, everybody. Here we are, just share. So I'm hoping you can see now my screen. Can you just confirm that for me?
Yeah,
great.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am currently leading, as colleagues mentioned at the beginning, a global study which has been commissioned by UNESCO, which is designed to study this scourge of online violence internationally, looking not just at a Western context, but also in particular at the global South. This is an international phenomenon, and women around the world who've experienced it are really being united in terms of the experiences and the challenges they've faced, which go to the impacts that Shiori so eloquently and affectingly described, through to the challenges for whether it's an employment organization, say a journalism institution, or state apparatus trying to respond through legal reform to this problem. These are very much shared experiences. So I call it the new front line, because what we see is really a convergence of the physical safety threats that female journalists have faced traditionally, internationally, in war zones. So those threats include, of course, the use of rape as a weapon of war, not just against female journalists and human rights defenders, but also, of course, female citizens in countries that are engaged in conflict. But these threats, these digital and psychological and physical safety threats that female journalists now face, are overlapping, they're convergent, and as I say here, they're really inseparable, and that's how we need to start thinking about these problems. They're also utterly terrifying where they intersect, and potentially deadly. I'm quite serious about this. We're seeing through research increasingly recognizable trails of conduct that point to the risk of offline violence, including the threat of murder with impunity. We saw that in the case of Gauri Lankesh, who was an Indian journalist who wrote about the increasing threats posed to democracy by Hindu nationalism in India. We saw that as well in the case of Daphne Caruana Galizia, the Maltese investigative journalist who was brutally murdered in a car bomb, and there is a campaign for justice continuing in her case. Both of these women, and I'll demonstrate through some other case studies as well, the shared patterns of behavior. Both of these women were targeted with very brutal online abuse in the lead up to their murder. And so we can almost draw a line between these online threats and offline acts of violence. So what I'm seeing is that female journalists are really at the intersection of digital era threats that through research over time we've established. So we know that there is an increasing likelihood that journalists will be targeted online for abuse and harassment, but especially being a female journalist, the very suggestion that a woman should have a voice and that she puts her head above the parapet to speak truth to power is incendiary in the minds of misogynists online. And so we see women journalists particularly being singled out for assault online. We also see a particularly pernicious threat where online harassment and violence intersect with disinformation campaigns, including orchestrated state-based disinformation campaigns. There is a live case study in this, well, there are several, but one in particular I'll talk about underway in the Philippines with the celebrated journalist Maria Ressa in the crosshairs there. In parallel, we see the threat of privacy erosion and what the implications are for our digital lives, where digital attacks can include threats to our online privacy and security. That can include phenomena like doxing and spoofing. Doxing being the publication, say, for example, of a female journalist's physical address and also other identifying information that makes her more likely to be a target offline. And spoofing is the impersonation of a person. So we've seen this in the case of journalists around the world, including those case studies I'll present here, whereby false accounts in the name of the journalist are set up, designed to discredit that journalist or in fact increase the risks and threats that she's facing. So of course, being a woman makes you more likely to be the target of offline abuse and harassment. Online, as I say, it significantly increases your risks as well. So the attacks are often more prolific and more violent, but definitely more sexualized as well. And important to note that apart from including really graphic threats of sexual violence, which are debilitating in ways that Shiori again so eloquently explained, these threats are often accompanied by threats to harm those that depend on us as women. So daughters, mothers, sisters, female friends. And there's some references there to some articles. So those of you in academia who want to go and check those references, please feel free. But you'll find much has been written about these themes. What we need now is some multidisciplinary research, and that's one of the things we're trying to do with the UNESCO study that's underway. So what does this new frontline look like? So I've identified three key elements when we talk about these convergent threats. One is that these are organic attacks on the one hand. So patriotic trolling is a term that's used to describe the pile-on that will happen. And you can see this happening in the US at the moment in reference to Donald Trump, where a female journalist might write something critical about the President of the United States, and they'll find themselves the subject of bans of organic tweeters or Facebookers, they pick their medium, piling on. But also we have paid troll armies and what are called sock puppet networks, so fraudulent accounts that are set up by sometimes black propaganda, public relations firms, and other actors connected to state-based orchestrated campaigns. And you of course have your misogynistic mobs who are there for sport to attack and to attempt to chill the voices of women. Then, as I said, we have the problems with digital security and privacy threats. So it becomes very important for female journalists to ensure that they are protecting their privacy online as well as they can, but also that their digital security is very tight so that their devices are not the subject of interception, that they're not victim to malware attacks and phishing attacks that are part of the phenomenon of online violence against women. And radiation is a theme. So the fact that it's not just you as an individual journalist or those family members I mentioned, but your audiences, so those who might rally to your defense, also become the targets and are at risk of being harassed themselves and exposed in the same ways that we are. And the fact that our sources as journalists are also being targeted in this way adds another layer of concern. So the ways in which we used to be able to protect our sources are under threat in an online environment as well. So how do these forms of attack manifest? I've mentioned the different implications, but to break it down, we see a combination of what you might call deep fakes and everyday fakes, or a combination of verbal abuse and manipulated images and memes and so on, in addition to what are called deep fakes, which are these fabricated synthetic videos and audio, which are designed to misrepresent the women being targeted. And they are designed to really humiliate and reduce your credibility in the eyes of your audiences and broader society. They're also, as Shiori has indicated, incredibly intimate. And there's a quote on the screen you can see there from one of the first women who spoke publicly about the experience of online violence at a time in 2015 and 2016 when women, particularly female journalists, were being told to simply grow a thicker skin, you know, as a way of dealing with this verbal violence, as Alexandra Pascalidou describes it here. And I think she makes such an important point about hearing and experiencing this when she wakes up. We have a very intimate relationship with digital devices now, and many of us will reach for our phone first thing in the morning, last thing at night, and it does feel like warfare if you're the one who's receiving these messages at such intensity and speed. I'm not going to read this quote out, but I'm going to encourage you to read it and to let it sink in, because it's heinous. And no wonder people like Shiori, who've been the subject of some of the worst of these sorts of attacks, feel that it is not just real, but that it's debilitating. And they feel physically afraid because they are in fact being threatened with incredible violence and despicable acts of sexual violence as well. This is Caroline Criado Perez, who's a well-known feminist author. And this was the kind of abuse that she received between about 2014 and 2016, when she was daring to suggest that Jane Austen, my favorite author and many others, in fact, should have her head on a banknote. And this was the kind of attack she experienced. Some of the other women, a couple of whom I'll talk about now, in addition to Shiori, who have talked publicly about their experiences, and to underline that is such an important and brave thing to do, to shine a light, to refuse to be silenced. It's the only way we can fight this. So on the top left of my screen here, we have Ferial Haffajee, who's a very prominent, respected South African editor who was brutally trolled over the past several years. Jessica Aro, who is a Finnish journalist, who is really a pioneer in investigating the online violence against journalists through her own experience. And she was the target of orchestrated Russian-linked troll networks. Jessica Valenti, who's written about, as a columnist in The Guardian, the impacts that online violence have had on her. Here we have Alexandra Pascalidou, whose quote I just read. And here is the woman at the center of what was known as Gamergate back in 2014, where we saw what happens when you're not only a female journalist, but you're a female journalist talking about and reporting on issues to do with technology. That's a particularly big trigger for misogynists. Rana Ayub, who I'll speak about in a minute as well, who is an Indian investigative reporter and has had the UN intervene on her behalf to try to get the Indian government to crack down on the kinds of assault she's experienced online. And of course, Maria Ressa, who is now so well known as a celebrated international journalist and one of the main targets of the Duterte regime in the Philippines, who spoke up about online violence in the context of eroding democracy in the Philippines back in 2016, and continues to be an international and forceful voice. So we have Maria in the Philippines, Rana in India, Ferial in South Africa, and also Jessica there. And I think in the case of Maria, which I'll detail a little bit of, we should acknowledge that she is really an emblematic case. She's at the center of a perfect storm of threats and attacks online, at the intersection of online violence, gender-based attacks, and also orchestrated disinformation assaults. The other term that you see on that screen there that I use is platform capture, which is something that I identified when looking at the ways in which news organizations and journalists have effectively been captured by the platforms. In Maria's case, it's Facebook. 99% of Filipinos who are on the internet are on Facebook, and they refer to it as the internet. And the fact that news organizations have become so dependent on Facebook, and the fact that Facebook perpetually fails to take significant enough action to defend and protect journalists who they've enticed to become reliant on the site, is a real challenge for us. So it's not just about states and legal reform and the need to adapt behavior. It's also about the responsibility of the platforms to deal effectively and swiftly with this problem, and to recognize that what we have here is a fundamental threat to freedom of expression in the form of a threat to journalism safety and media freedom. So that's what we need to defend by demanding actions by the platforms. And we need to stop accepting their argument that in trying to get accountability and trying to suppress this kind of hateful conduct, we're somehow trying to undermine freedom of speech. These are not the same thing. So I'm going to, because we're running out of time, just take you through a few resources where you can find out more about Maria's case. She, of course, I probably don't need to remind you, has just been found guilty of criminal libel in a trumped up charge, or on a trumped up charge in the Philippines. And she's facing up to 100 years in jail as part of a state coordinated attack on her and Rappler, the organization that she founded. Which has been fueled in no small part by online violence and coordinated disinformation laced attacks on her. That's where she sees the accountability lacking. And she says that Facebook broke democracy in the Philippines. She blames Facebook for its failure to take action for the predicament she finds herself in because of the virality of these sorts of attacks. And so that resource I showed there is a UNESCO book chapter from a book called An Attack on One is an Attack on All. And you can go and find that and download it for free online. So Maria says many things that resonated with me again when I was listening to Shiori about the need to speak up, to hold powerful people to account. Ferial Haffajee as well in South Africa talked about the visceral nature of these attacks and how it really, really went to the core of her identity. And you can read in her own words what she experienced via the Daily Maverick, which is the outlet she currently writes for in South Africa. And she also talks about the need to hold the platforms to account, saying that, we can't accept cyber misogyny as the new normal, which is a point I'd like to underline as well, because ultimately these threats do not stay in some innocuous online world. They jump to the physical world, and the psychological damage needs to be acknowledged as being extremely serious and debilitating. Rana Ayub, who gets rape and death threats on a daily basis, one of the features of her case, which are similar to the others, is that she was also the subject of spoofing, where her account was taken over, or rather, a fake account was made in her name, and that fake account tweeted an incendiary tweet that suggested that she was approving child sexual abuse. In another case, there was a deepfake video made about her, a conservative Muslim woman who was portrayed as being part of a porn video. And so these acts dramatically increased the risks and threats she was facing. We see here an excerpt from a UN Special Rapporteur's joint statement in her defense, calling on the Indian government to protect her. In her situation, things have escalated dramatically during the past 6 months as well. And finally, Jessica Aro, who is an investigative reporter in Finland, who had some incredibly chilling threats made against her, and who has also used the law to cause 2 of the people she identified as attacking her to be charged and sentenced. One of them was still serving jail time last time I checked. And as with the others, the narratives include undermining the intelligence and credibility of the targets, but also suggesting that somehow these women are connected often to, you know, the CIA or NATO, that they're spies. These are the sort of state orchestrated attacks. And as Jessica says, we need to accept that cyber wars do have some kinetic qualities, and the way we respond, therefore, has to go well beyond normalizing this behavior and suggesting women grow thicker skins. So I think I'll stop here. I've got some pointers there about the motivations of malicious actors who target women in these ways that hopefully help us at the point of understanding motivations to think about how to map through perhaps, you know, big network analysis and various other research techniques that help us understand the kinds of language that's used and the sorts of patterns and connections of some of these more orchestrated campaigns. The fact that we need to work together collaboratively across boundaries in an interdisciplinary way and be activist in the way we're supporting these journalists, I think becomes very important. And I'll stop there so that we have time to talk amongst ourselves, and also, of course, hopefully to take some questions.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Julie. I wonder if we'd like to have a look at Shiori's poll results. Can you see the results yourself, Shiori-san?
Yes, I see.
Yeah, do you have any comments on them?
So now we see the question number 1 was, have you ever been a victim of online harassment? And so 22% answered yes, 78% no. So I think 22% is quite high. I was expecting could be higher, but I think it's still quite high. I wish I could have asked where you're from, but let's see. I'd love to know. So the second question was,
yeah, what did you do about it, right? Yeah.
Yes. So if you have encountered this online harassment, what have you done? And the first one is, report it to social media or web platform. 26% have done it. I think that's the first action that you would take. And I'm quite surprised that 50% of people have went to police. That's, I wonder what
that's
kind
high,
of,
yeah.
That is quite high. But the majority have done nothing.
Yeah.
I don't know in UK, but in Japan, if you want to find out these anonymous posts, or if you want to find out who it is, you only can do the post within 3 months old. So it's quite hard, because sometimes you don't realize that it was attacking you right away, because sometimes it takes time to circulate, or sometimes it takes time for you to decide to make a legal action. So having this 3-month limit in Japan is quite it has been quite big barrier to take a step.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it is in UK. For instance, France and Germany, I think, if the platform has responsibility to delete hateful message, hate speech from their platform. So I think that kind of system is needed.
And
And
perhaps we
I
could
just
just
want to
share
thank
the
for,
final question in the poll.
I know that was the hardest one. So the question was, have you ever participated or online harassment?
So we did have a couple of people who admitted to it, which is interesting. Obviously, we don't know who they are.
So thank you so much for your honesty. And yeah, so 97% say no, 2%, 3 people say yes, anonymous 3, and 1% yes with identity visible. So I'm very happy that you joined this session today, because I don't know what you could have taken today from our talk, but it affects someone. So thank you so much for deciding to join this session today so much, everyone. And I wish we had more time. I realize that we are quite over time with
Okay, well, no, so thank you very much to both of you. So Shiori Ito and Dr. Julie Possetti, really interesting discussion. I hope that the two of you will be able to carry on working together in the future. We like to think we might have started something here. But for today, thank you very much to both of our speakers, and we're going to say bye-bye.